The dynamic of my entire household completely shattered into pieces the moment my grandfather walked into my medical room with a heavy, weather-beaten folder. I am Alana Vance, and at 34 years old, the harsh reality of my family's true nature hit me like a physical blow while I lay trapped in an emergency ward. Just 6 weeks prior, I experienced the immense joy of bringing my beautiful daughter Clara into the world, navigating those exhausting early days of first-time motherhood with a happy heart. But an ordinary evening drive home from my late corporate shift instantly turned into an absolute nightmare when an oversized commercial vehicle completely ignored a solid red light and plowed directly into my sedan. When consciousness finally crept back, an excruciating pressure clamped down tightly on my chest from 3 fractured ribs and a severely lacerated lung, while a heavy plaster cast fully encased my shattered right forearm. My husband Kenneth was stuck hundreds of miles away on an urgent corporate assignment, facing a grueling 6-hour journey just to reach my side. Our helpless newborn needed immediate care that night, and since my mother resided a mere 15 minutes away from the medical center, she was my automatic choice. Yet, she flatly refused to come, a cold decision that set off a massive chain reaction, forever altering the trajectory of our lives. I woke up beneath the harsh glare of the intensive care unit, hooked up to buzzing medical equipment while a soft-spoken nurse checked my vitals. Every single inch of my body throbbed with intense pain, but my immediate focus shifted to my smartphone resting on the pillow, where Kenneth's strained voice came through the speaker. He sounded incredibly cautious, masking an underlying panic that instantly put me on high alert because I knew that tone meant trouble. "Alana," he murmured with deep hesitation. "The neighborhood teenager who is watching Clara absolutely has to leave by 11 tonight." I closed my eyes as a wave of exhaustion washed over me, already anticipating the devastating blow before he even finished his sentence. "I reached out to your mother," he confessed quietly, "but she won't step up to help us." A heavy, suffocating silence filled the space between us, soon punctuated by the distinct, chaotic background noises filtering through the receiver. I clearly detected upbeat music, electronic slot machine chimes, and boisterous laughter, the unmistakable, lively atmosphere of a crowded casino floor. My mother was out celebrating with her social circle, callously claiming she couldn't leave because she had committed to pet-sitting my younger sister Celeste's cat. Celeste was currently enjoying a luxury ocean cruise, meaning a literal pet was deemed far more important than her own daughter lying broken in an emergency room. My tiny, innocent infant desperately required a protector, but my mother consciously prioritized an animal over her own flesh and blood. Surprisingly, no tears fell from my eyes, defying the classic cinematic trope of a vulnerable woman completely disintegrating under the weight of family betrayal. Instead, I focused my gaze entirely on the plastic identification band wrapping my wrist, instantly shifting into my natural state of practical crisis management. In moments of chaos, clarity becomes your greatest weapon. Looking back at my life, that exact instinct to constantly fix every problem was precisely what enabled their toxic behavior for so long. To understand how I reached this breaking point, you must understand the environment that shaped me from childhood. I was raised in a cramped, drafty apartment, where financial anxiety was a constant guest, forcing me to clock endless night shifts at a local warehouse just to fund my state college tuition. I hunted down academic grants, mastered complex data analysis, and meticulously built my professional reputation from the ground, up until I secured a role as a principal financial advisor. My daily corporate life revolved around a beautiful certainty, uncovering raw truth hidden deep within complex ledgers, where variables never played favorites and equations never told lies. Human beings, however, proved to be an entirely different story altogether. Kenneth and I built our life around extreme financial discipline, earning an excellent joint income but choosing to live far below our actual means. We drove a single high-mileage vehicle, avoided consumer debt entirely, skipped lavish getaways, and intentionally rejected material luxury. That exact financial restraint allowed me to secretly distribute a massive portion of my earnings to my parents every single month for 9 consecutive years. I channeled vast sums of money to them in complete secrecy, never uttering a word about these transactions to anyone, including my own husband. I fed myself a comforting narrative that this capital was directly securing my aging father's well-being and keeping my childhood home safe. Over nearly a decade, Providing this constant safety net became the bedrock of my personal identity as the unbreakable, ultra-responsible daughter who solves everything. Lying in that sterile bed, I systematically tackled the most pressing issue by searching my contacts and hiring an elite overnight newborn care agency we had vetted. A representative answered our emergency call instantly, and upon hearing about my accident and Kenneth's travel delay, she dispatched an expert night nurse named Evelyn. Within 40 minutes, Evelyn arrived at our residence, sanitized her hands, and sent a reassuring photo of Clara sleeping soundly with one miniature fist tucked under her chin. Staring at that peaceful image, a wave of profound relief washed over me just as the attending nurse offered a sympathetic smile. "Do you have any close relatives arriving to support you through this?" she asked softly. "The situation is fully handled," I replied flatly, watching her blink in utter bewilderment at my complete lack of outward emotion. But I wasn't cold, I simply understood that panic solves nothing when your family's safety requires absolute logic. My child was safe, my partner was en route, my physical injuries would heal, but one massive piece of unfinished business remained. For nearly a decade, I had intentionally blinded myself to the actual velocity of the money I poured into my parents' bank accounts. Right there in the dark room, I launched my mobile banking application, the bright display cutting through the shadows as I pulled up the automated transfers. I stared at the 4 individual recurring transactions, one for general living, one for their property mortgage, one for paternal medical care, and one for Celeste. 4 distinct streams of wealth, flowing out month after month, year after year, completely unchecked. My finger hovered over the glass as I forced myself to aggregate the grand total of this decade-long generosity. The final mathematical reality flashed on the screen: $486,000. Nearly $500,000 of our hard-earned capital had vanished into a black hole, distributed in quiet, automatic increments without a single question. With zero hesitation, I tapped the screen and deleted the first recurring payment, watching the confirmation light up green, transfer permanently revoked. I systematically canceled the second, third, and fourth streams in a matter of 20 seconds, ending a 9-year cycle with 4 simple taps. I felt no explosive anger, only an overwhelming sense of profound lucidity, until a specific historical transaction caught my eye. Buried deep within the archival logs of my father's medical sub-account was a hidden $40,000 wire transfer labeled as an urgent personal loan to Celeste. It had absolutely nothing to do with healthcare or spinal surgery. It was a direct subsidy for my sister's vanity. I locked the screen, stared blankly at the acoustic ceiling tiles, and finally confronted the uncomfortable psychological truth behind my behavior. Was I truly desperate for their validation? Or was the reality of my codependency something much darker and far more complex? I had fundamentally mistaken being financially exploited for being genuinely loved, believing that my worth was tied to how much pressure I could withstand. My grandmother Beatrice recognized this toxic dynamic long before I ever did, pulling me aside during a holiday gathering before her passing. She squeezed my hand tightly, whispering, "Someone needs to audit where the funds in this family are vanishing, because your mother never will." At the time, I foolishly misread her warning as an invitation to be even more self-sacrificing, completely missing her true intent. Beatrice passed away the following spring while I was fully consumed by corporate projects and my 3rd trimester, leaving the estate settlement to my mother. I blindly assumed everything was processed correctly, just as I blindly assumed my monthly stipends were keeping my father comfortable and healthy. But that night, the illusion shattered completely, forcing me to realize I wasn't protecting my family. I was funding a fictional story. The actual flesh and blood people had just chosen a vacationing sister's pet over the safety of my injured child. Later that morning, Kenneth called during his airport layover to relay the exact script of his conversation with my mother, knowing I demanded precise details. He described how he literally pleaded with her to drive over, explaining that I was undergoing emergency trauma surgery while Clara was entirely alone. My mother simply issued a dramatic, exaggerated sigh over the receiver before uttering a sentence that will ring in my ears forever. "Your sister Celeste never subjects us to these sudden, exhausting emergencies." As if getting blindsided by a speeding truck was a deliberate choice, or as if fate checks a family popularity contest before distributing tragedy. I instructed my husband to focus entirely on his flight, ended the call, and opened my social media feeds to find Celeste's latest update. There she was, lounging by a pristine infinity pool overlooking azure ocean waters, holding a tropical cocktail with a flawless, radiant smile. Her caption read, "Embracing absolute paradise." Celeste was 29, an aspiring digital creator with thousands of superficial followers, of self-made crises, and a massive lifestyle funded by an invisible safety net. She genuinely believed her life was naturally abundant, completely oblivious to the engine driving it because our mother intentionally kept her in the dark. I didn't leave a public comment. Instead, I sent a brief text to my grandfather Vernon that read, "We need to talk." His typing bubbles materialized instantly, but before he could type a response, Celeste's incoming call overrode the screen. She was standing in a sun-drenched courtyard with upbeat resort music blasting behind her, completely ignoring the sterile background of my medical room or my heavy cast. Without a single inquiry about my physical well-being, she launched into a complaint. "Alana, my premium card just got declined at the resort spa. Mom explicitly told me the master family account handles all my travel expenses. Did you forget to process something? Family account?" I nearly burst out laughing at the sheer absurdity of her ignorance, realizing she genuinely believed our family possessed a mythical inheritance fund. "Celeste," I asked quietly, "did anyone bother to inform you that I am currently hospitalized after a major car crash?" She paused, blinking at her camera before offering a defense that left me completely stunned. "Are you seriously trying to overdramatize things right now just to ruin my trip?" I severed the connection instantly, the steady, rhythmic pulsing of my heart monitor filling the quiet room as I processed her unbelievable lack of empathy. Yet, Celeste wasn't inherently evil. She was simply a product of a lifetime completely insulated from reality, having never seen the bottom of the well. The following afternoon, I was transferred to a private recovery room, which is precisely when our extended family group chat absolutely exploded with notifications. Messages flooded in from distant aunts, uncles, and cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years, all reacting to a massive post from my mother. She painted herself as a heartbroken victim, claiming I had callously cut off my vulnerable parents and placed my father's fragile health in immediate jeopardy. Then she typed the ultimate lie. "We have always proudly paved our own way through life without anyone's handouts." 9 years of relentless financial support totaling nearly $500,000. And she was actively erasing my entire sacrifice to maintain appearances. Condemnations poured in alongside broken heart icons and judgmental prayers from relatives who swallowed her narrative hook, line, and sinker. For a split second, that old familiar urge to defend my character surfaced, but I chose a completely different weapon this time: absolute data. When Kenneth finally walked into the room carrying Clara's infant seat, his face was pale with sheer exhaustion, his eyes welling with tears at the sight of my stitched skin. He placed our daughter gently against my chest, and for a beautiful moment, the outside chaos completely vanished into the background. Then my phone rang again, displaying my father Warren's contact info. His voice was incredibly feeble as he whispered my childhood nickname. "Lainey, I didn't know the extent of what you were doing for us. I never wanted you carrying this entire house on your back." For a fleeting second, a spark of hope ignited within me that he might finally stand up for the truth. But my mother's sharp, commanding voice instantly cut through the background, demanding to know who he was speaking to, causing him to panic. "I have to get off the phone. Just heal up," he whispered before the line went dead, retreating back into his decades of protective silence. That evening, Kenneth handed me my laptop, and I began constructing a master spreadsheet to trace every single dollar I had transferred over the past decade. What those financial records revealed would completely dismantle their entire web of deception. And 3 hours later, an old man holding a legal folder would expose a secret my mother spent a lifetime trying to bury. I sat propped up against the pillows, tracing the digital footprint of my bank statements while Clara slept peacefully in her bassinet. Row by row, date by date, a sinister pattern began to emerge from the raw numbers, proving my trust had been completely weaponized against me. The massive mortgage payments I thought were saving their home had only been processed a few times, and my father's true medical bills were practically microscopic. The capital wasn't preserving my family, It was being systematically drained across hundreds of identical cash withdrawals at the Blackstone Ridge casino. My mother hadn't been enjoying casual outings. She had developed a severe, hidden gambling dependency funded entirely by my corporate labor. The secondary trail led straight to Celeste, covering luxury vehicle leases, high-end apartment rentals, credit card balances, and international travel. Out of nearly $500,000, a mere fraction had actually touched my father's healthcare, while the vast majority subsidized a casino cage and an influencer fantasy. I compiled the data into a single devastating 12-row summary document, feeling a profound sense of absolute emotional detachment take over. When the truth is written in ink, the illusions lose their power to hurt you. The next day marked the first of the month, and for the first time in 9 years, no automated deposit cleared into my parents' account. By midday, my phone lit up with my mother's caller ID, and when I finally answered on the fourth attempt, her voice was dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Darling, we've been utterly sick with worry about your recovery," she cooed, completely ignoring that she had abandoned my newborn for a cat. Within 60 seconds, she smoothly pivoted to the real objective. "Sweetie, we noticed a strange delay with the monthly family transfer." I informed her calmly that the stoppage was intentional, which instantly triggered the exact guilt trip she had weaponized since my childhood. She launched into a tirade about parental sacrifice, family duty, and respect, culminating in her favorite toxic phrase, "Your sister Celeste never creates these exhausting situations." I simply replied, "I know," before hanging up on her for the very first time in my existence, watching the world remain perfectly still. Hours later, Aunt Darlene sent a text expressing her deep disappointment, claiming Grandmother Beatrice would be thoroughly ashamed of my cold selfishness. In response, I simply forwarded the 12-row financial spreadsheet along with a single sentence. "This is the exact destination of my 9 years of support." The typing indicator danced continuously before vanishing into absolute silence, because mathematical proof is impossible to manipulate. Shortly after, my mother announced an emergency extended family dinner under the guise of welcoming baby Clara, though her true intent was blindingly obvious. She wanted to trap me in a room filled with judging eyes, using collective family shame to force my financial submission. Kenneth urged me to stay home, but I wanted the ultimate truth out in the open, so I confirmed our attendance. I connected with Grandfather Vernon, who asked a single definitive question: "Do you want the situation handled quietly, or do you want it handled truthfully?" I looked at my beautiful daughter and replied, "Truthfully." Vernon nodded, promising to bring the missing pieces of the puzzle. When Sunday arrived, we drove to my childhood home, my fractured ribs aching as I kept my plastic hospital ID bracelet tightly in my pocket as a reminder. Vernon met us at the driveway, a thick legal binder tucked securely under his arm as we prepared to face the crowded living room. We walked inside, the loud chatter instantly dying down as my mother put on a theatrical smile and lunged forward to grab Clara. Kenneth smoothly stepped past her, causing her performance smile to fracture slightly before she turned to address the gathered relatives. She launched into a victim monologue, weeping openly about my sudden, inexplicable cruelty toward my aging parents after everything they had provided. "I just don't comprehend this malicious behavior," she sobbed, delivering her signature line right on cue. "Her sister Celeste never puts us through these crises." Instead of shouting, I reached into our bag, pulled out the printed spreadsheet, and placed it directly on the center of the dinner table. "You're completely right, Mom," I announced with absolute calm. "Celeste never experiences these emergencies because I have been entirely funding her life." The room fell dead silent as I walked them through the $486,000 total, explicitly highlighting the $290,000 drained at the casino and the $120,000 spent on Celeste's luxury lifestyle. My mother's face turned completely white as my sister stared at the document in utter horror, realizing her magical allowance was actually my blood, sweat, and tears. When my mother tried to scream that I was fabricating data, the heavy thud of Vernon's cane echoed through the room as he stepped forward. "Alana is telling the absolute truth," Vernon declared, opening his legal binder to reveal binding trust documents established by grandmother Beatrice before her death. Beatrice had secretly discovered the gambling debts and the exploitation years ago, working with Vernon to legally secure the family's real estate assets. Then Vernon delivered the final blow. The master trust did not belong to my mother, and it never would. The entire estate had been legally willed directly to me and my daughter Clara, stripping my mother of her unearned kingdom in front of everyone she sought to manipulate. She turned to my father in absolute desperation, screaming, "Warren, stand up and defend us right now." My father looked up, his voice cracking as he whispered, "She's right. The gambling, the deception, it's all true." But the moment his eyes met my mother's venomous glare, his courage dissolved, and he looked back down at the floor, trapped forever in his own silence. We walked out of that house without slamming a single door, completely free from the emotional parasites who had drained my life for a decade. Today, the trust remains secure. My parents are permitted to reside in the home for life, but the casino funds have dried up permanently. Celeste finally transitioned into a legitimate corporate marketing job after I answered her text for money, with that exact same spreadsheet. If my time in that hospital bed taught me anything, it is that people will constantly praise your strength when they really mean they expect you to carry their weight forever. The moment you stop financing their irresponsibility is the exact moment you discover who genuinely values your soul. For me, that realization yielded something far greater than their cheap approval. It brought me absolute freedom. If this powerful story resonated with your life, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more deep insights into human nature. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. What boundaries would you have set?